Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Des Hague. He has had a fascinating career in hospitality and also was faced by cancel culture. It is one of the most fascinating podcasts I believe I've ever recorded. So please enjoy my conversation with Des Hague. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, I have a very, very special guest. I'm sure that many of you in our industry have met him or one of the company he's been working for. Tremendous executive leader, start really from humble beginnings, and we're going to talk about it. Develop an amazing career. Then something happened in his life. Someday we make a mistake, but in this case, it was the perfect example of cancel culture. It was absolutely insane what happened to him. He had the courage to write a book about it, which is coming out today. It's called 15 Minutes of Shame. And it is my honor and great pleasure to welcome Des Hague to the podcast. Des, thank you so much for being here today.
Eric, thank you. Really awesome to be here. And before we even start, I want to let you know and the viewers know here, pick up this book. An unbelievable book. Before it's too late, it was a book written by a gentleman called Eric Rosenberg. This gentleman here talks about his experiences, what he's lived through, the unbelievable journey that his grandparents went through to survive World War II, jumping out of a railway car destined for Auschwitz. It is a remarkable story. I fully recommend it to anybody out there. Again, before it's too late, it was inspired and written for his loving wife and 3 daughters. And I think everybody will enjoy this read. So first of all, kudos to you, Eric.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of the podcast. Thank you very much, Des. I should hire you as my agent, but no, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And for those watching on YouTube, you see behind me the cover of your book. But let's start with where your journey started, because I was living in Belgium, which people in the UK call the continent, somewhere there, the continent. But you're born in the UK, and gosh, your young years were not the easiest one, to say the least.
Yeah, well, you were from continental Europe. I'm from the UK, which is Europe. And, with a great soccer team as well, a football team, not like Belgium as well. Don't take it personally, Eric.
Sorry,
I got to tell you,
I'm not going to interrupt you more, but I live in Miami. We have Messi. I think the discussion is closed on soccer. But let's go back to you and the UK.
Okay, well, first of all, you have David Beckham, who brought in Messi. So just remember that. My great Manchester United striker, number 7. No, in all seriousness, I had a shaky childhood. I was born in Belfast. My mother was Irish. My father was English in the 60s. It wasn't it was a very frowned upon situation to have interreligious relationships. My family's business was blown up and set on fire. We fled Belfast when I was a 2-year-old with my brother, my mother, and father. And we arrived in the UK into a little village called Rotherham near Sheffield in the north of England. Everything was going great. My mother suddenly becomes ill at 29 years old with 4 sons. She passes away with ovarian cancer, ripped apart the family. Awful situation. You can imagine what it was like for kids to grow up and witness and see that deterioration. It was awful. But that was the beginning of awfulness. My dad remarried, as anybody, could and would, but this time to a raging alcoholic with demon tendencies. So within a 3-month period of losing my mother and then having a cleaner come in and suddenly having somebody new join the house, this woman started to create unbelievable havoc. It started as an escalation of abuse. It started psychologically with words, and then that morphed one day to extreme violence when she was drunk. So I'm 9 years old. My mother, stepmother, started to, my dad married, unfortunately, tragically, and she started beating the boys. And so at the fourth night, I thought, I've got to do something. My brothers are getting beaten here, and I can't put up with it. I got to stand. If you're going to do it yourself. So I stood up, a 9-year-old boy. I was nothing but, arms and limbs at the top of the stair. And my stepmother comes up. Oh, I could hear her stomping up the stairs. I could almost smell the booze from her. And I got to tell you, Eric, I wasn't brave. I was scared witless. My sweat was sweating. It was the panic, the heart palpitations. But I stood in front of her, and I wasn't going to let her get into the bedroom with my 3 brothers in there. I said, no, and I pushed her back, and I knew I was going to get an unbelievable beating. And I did. But I stood my ground. I didn't punch her back. My mother, God bless her soul, always said, never hit a woman, use words. And so I took her central message to Tennant to seriousness and stepped back, just let this woman wail on me, but just pushed her back. And so that was my life for the next 6 years, almost on a nightly basis. So I remember nights of, having almost a hot frying pan of oil thrown on me by this woman. I remember being hospitalized when she smashed a plate right across my right kneecap. I seen blood right in front of my brothers. My dad was there. If you can believe this, how can a man let his child, let somebody do this to them? It's almost unconscionable. It is unconscionable. But that was kind of my life. And then at 15, she attacked me again. And this time I said enough, and I pushed her down and said, if you ever touch me, it'll be the last thing you do. And that's how I left home. So, Eric, I left home at 15. I was homeless, slept under in the bushes. And then I found, kind of my next life of finding a job and pulling myself up from the bootstraps to have a normal life.
That's I have no words. I was just thinking, maybe unrelated, but I was watching the WhatsApp group of the parents, and my kids went back to school yesterday, and what they're complaining about the fact that there's no locker this year, and I was thinking, oh great, school has started again. We can start worrying about important things again. This is ridiculous. And then here you are, a 15 years old boy, after 6 years of losing your mom, and I mean, I have no words. So you started in the fish and chips. That's what we describe in the book. That basically, after leaving the house, being homeless, and being offered an opportunity to start working, which is kind of directing your career in terms of food business, taking care of people. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, I kind of was destined to be in the hospitality business, the food service, retail kind of space. A friend of the family had a fish and chip shop. My elder brother worked for the friend. And so when I was homeless and thinking, what am I going to do? That was the only solution I had that came to mind after about 3 nights of living in this derelict old house with no roof. I remember getting upstairs, Eric, walking up the stairs with no steps. So I'm climbing up there, and I said, I'll be safer on the upper floor. And I'm laid in bed, or not laid in bed, I'm laid on the, floorboards. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a full moon. I look up, and there's demonic signs all over the ceiling. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I jumped out of that house so quickly, and then spent the next 2 nights living under this bush in the park. And I thought, I got to do something. This is not good. I've got no money. I'm only going to get into trouble if I don't find a way. And just by luck, I knew that the friend of the family who owned the fish and chip shop went past this road every day on the way to work. So I walked up there, flagged him down. Luckily, that day, he really saved my life. He started me working. He had this fish and chip shop, as I said. It was very, very successful. I would peel 50-pound bags of potatoes, 5 and 6 a day, with a knife, not the traditional peeler. And that's how I got introduced to business. So I started in the fish and chip shop. We then opened the first video shop in my town. Then we opened up a butcher's store, then a convenience store. So when I started, I was 15. By 17, I was managing every single one of those properties. They were all very close in proximity, but it was an unbelievable learning in business. This guy was super smart. He knew branding. And by the way, I'm dyslexic. He couldn't read and write. So he got all this done with his brain power. I would do the banking. He'd X his signature. He was like living in the old cowboy days. So I do this for a few years. Things are going great. I'm learning a ton. Think about it. You're 17 years old. I'm not going to, the pubs and clubs and all that kind of stuff. I'm really ingrained in business, loving it. Opening a video store. I remember telling all my friends I'm in the movie business. And all I was doing was selling video cassettes. But it's a different skill set. It's not selling fish and chips. It's not selling chunks of meat. You're in the service business and you're learning new skills. Unfortunately, around my 18th birthday, a friend of my friends who ran the fish and chip shop and those businesses, he came to visit, violently raped me. Unbelievable. 300, and I'm like, tough guy, 6'1", thinking I'm really tough. When a guy who's 300 pounds drops on you, it's very hard to do anything when you're getting pummeled in the head. And so that was another low point. So I jumped out of the frying pan, forgive the pun, into an even more brutal situation. Shortly after there, I left that situation, got my own, before food trucks were even a thing, got my own food caravan, decked it out with a fish and chip shop, pans and pots and everything else, got myself in hock with a kind of a loan shark for this, got a car, left that situation behind.
Have an accident.
First day going to an event, crashed my car, wrecked and destroyed my business. Now I'm back to being homeless again. So I'm not going back for another, abuse session. So I'm homeless. And then I find a good friend who will let me stay with him on his couch with his mom and dad, and started in corporate life. Got a job in Wimpy Burgers that then was bought by Burger King. And that launched my corporate, enterprise journey.
It's fascinating, the resilience that you need to have. And I know when you're talking about it in the book, and you said nobody's going to believe what happened to me with this guy. So I think that also will resonate with a lot of people, that you need to speak up. Unfortunately, is very hard, and too many times people are not believed in
right.
What they say. So you're going to corporate, and then fast forward. So I don't want to explain everything that is in the book, because I want people to discover. And by the way, I read your book in 2 days. I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you.
It's a page turner, as I think you say in English. So from the UK, you ended up in Poland. If you can share that experience, and also not only did you crash the car of your boss, but if I'm not mistaken, the new boss that you had in the company in Poland is now your boss. Still is your boss, but in your private life.
Yes, she is. She's my boss, and she's my wife for the last 28 years. So that was, I got to tell you, Eric, going to Poland in my early 20s was one of the most rewarding and fulfilling and exponentially enhanced my career than anything I could have done. We went into Poland, we opened up Pizza Huts and Taco Bell and KFCs. And these stores are doing 20 and 30 times the volume that we would see in the UK and in the US. And, so I'm opening these facilities. We were planning to open up 5 within a year. We opened up almost 50 plus within a year. We had hundreds of management under my control. Again, very junior, but getting these experiences, I can't thank PepsiCo and Whitbread and some of these other companies that I've worked with for giving us unbelievable opportunities. So I'm in Poland and I'm doing great. And the leadership said, we're going to bring in, a real heavy hitter to help us grow because we need somebody being there and done it. And I'm thinking, what about me? I can do this, but I didn't get a vote. So lo and behold, this lady comes in and ends up being my wife. But the first meeting I had with her, she'd lost her luggage coming from the US, spent a whole day trying to find a new outfit, sat in a room full of, English, Scottish, New Zealand, Canadians, Mexicans who we brought from all over the world. And she had no idea what we were saying. But that was my first experience. I said to my friends, my colleagues, we won't see her again. About 2 months later, she pitches up. She's in charge. She's now the big kahuna. I'm thinking, this is outrageous. So I say to, the lady, I said, why don't I take you to come and see my stores? And she said, no, they're my stores now. Yes, you can. So anyway, I get into her car. She's got a Saab 9000. I've got a one-seater Fiat 126. I'm thinking, this is not right. This is not equitable, leadership's rewards here. Long story short, I get into a car. Within 15 seconds, I've hit a pothole, completely destroyed the car. All anarchy unleashes. And that was the beginning of my relationship of 28 years with my wife.
Yes, a good start. It's a very good start. You know what's fascinating when I was reading your story is that both of you have a amazing corporate career, and that the balance it's not easy. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would tell you that my wife has had an unbelievable career. Without my wife, I wouldn't be where I am. That is for sure. It's just seeing somebody operate at that level with the calmness, with, she's a single parent, she's got children, she's looking after and managing. She is like the Swiss Army knife. And that's the skill set that just watching her, I could emulate. I mean, I think it's great to learn, but if you can learn through others, that's why I'm a big believer in read as many biographies as you can. Read Musk, read Gates, read whoever, read, Bezos. Get into their mind because they are just be a sponge. And so I think it's critically important. You see how people at a high level operate and learn from them, make your mistakes, fall forward, evolve, get better, get up, fall again, get up and keep going. And that's kind of how I feel that to have a fulfilling and high pressured role and have a family, you got to start being creative around how you make it all work. And it is challenging. It's not easy. And you see people come unglued on a daily basis. The fact of the matter is never stop learning, do whatever it takes, learn from others, have some kindness, and you're going to go places.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, and sorry if I'm not respecting the timeline, but afterwards you're going back, both of you, to the UK.
Went back to the UK from Poland. Carol ran PepsiCo Europe for operations and training. So the 26 continental countries, also the UK and others she's responsible for. I go back to work for a company called Whitbread, which is the third largest retailer in Europe at the time. So I'm opening up, liquor stores, Big, they've got the Beefeater restaurant chain, TGI Fridays, a lot of businesses under the Whitbread umbrella. I'm predominantly working in the Thresher liquor store business.
And then that's the moment, also in the book, you described that you wanted to do an MBA. But obviously, having left earlier school, although you have tremendous experience, the conservative system will not really allow for that, and also the challenge with some of the math. But then again, you don't want to come back home and tell your wife you were not being accepted. So tell us what happened at that moment.
Well, it was even worse than that, Eric. I mean, I knew, or our game plan was, when you think about what you need to do in life, is what's your vision? What do you want to achieve? And so our why in life for living was, we're going to obviously be together as a team, but we're going to predominantly be in the USA. My wife sat me down and said, Des, you're doing great. You're 27, 26. But if you're going to operate in the US, you have to have an MBA. It's a prerequisite. So I signed up online, sent my application to 6 or 7 different MBA schools. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Didn't matter that I was running a multi-100 million plus business. I had no formal education, Eric. I left at 15. I had nothing. It was frowned upon. So I remember this day vividly. I'm driving down the M25, which is like a huge parking lot that goes around London very, 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 very slowly. And my wife, I remember she's going to Germany on a trip. She's on the plane. And I call her to complain that I have now been rejected by the American University in London. Thinking I was going to get some sympathy, what I got was some reality. Des, stop whining, go and make something happen. So after, looking at the phone, thinking, where should I put this phone? I decided, I stormed off slowly, by the way, on the M25 to central London. This is 1994. You couldn't do it in today's environment for sure. So I get down to Marylebone Lane, where the university is. I storm in. I say I want to meet the principal. It ends up being a dean. They let me in, which is unbelievable. I'm sure that's not reality today. But I storm in and I state my case. I said, listen, I'm 27. I got no formal qualifications. I'm running hundreds of locations for the third largest retailer in the UK, in Europe. This has got to stand for something. The dean, patient man, said, it's not for everybody. This is difficult. You have to have foundational education to be able to do your MBA. I'm thinking there's no way I'm going home to tell Carol that I haven't made it through. So I'm still like kind of not in the guy's face, but kind of assertive, saying, why don't we do this? Why don't you give me the aptitude test that you have to have anyway for the class? And after some umming and ahhing, he said, well, why not? And so I aced the test. Long story short, 2 years later, magna cum laude, case study for the school system, and had a great experience. And I'll tell you this, Eric, I started my MBA thinking, all I want is a piece of paper. What I came away from that was an unbelievable passion to never stop learning. It was so much more than that piece of paper.
That's another thing that I like in your book. People write about their experience and the tough experience in life and how they were resilient. People talk about business and management lessons, which, by the way, they're full of management lessons in your book, which is another reason to read it. People talk about and write about different topics. You have everything at once. And we're going to get also to the part, of course, in a few minutes of why you wrote this book. But it's fascinating to me, all the different life and all different aspects that you wrote about. And what I personally love is that there's always a song for every subchapter. And you know what? Every song that you mentioned, I can remember it. I even know the words sometimes. So really, really interesting. So you're now in the UK, and you said that the long-term plan was to go to the US.
Right.
Your wife is one of the top shot of Pepsi in Europe. You're one of the top shot of Whitbread in the UK. How does that happen? How does the opportunity present itself, and what is your decision-making process as a couple?
Well, first and foremost, we knew we were going to go to the States. So that wasn't like a big awakening, a big challenge for me. The timing couldn't have been better. The week I finished my MBA, the next week, Carol is getting reassigned back to Dallas to run refranchising for the 9,000 Pizza Hut locations in North America.
Wow.
So that was perfect timing. It wasn't like, oh, well, I've got to leave my job. Of course, I was sad. I had great people. My career was really going well. We'd won some national awards and things were great. But this was an eventuality that was known. Timing and sequencing, not known, but got determined. So we ended up in Dallas. Carl's doing great things at Pizza Hut. I, though, have got no job. I came to find work. Knew I would.
Sorry, just one little thing that you mentioned in the book that I want just want to mention it. You say you came to the US. She came to the US, but at the beginning, the US was probably still thinking that getting independent from the UK, they didn't let you in. What happened?
No, that's a great story. Sorry, Eric. Great catch. So I'm now a proud new dad of DJ, my youngest son, who's now 27, which is ironic because I got married at 27. And we're at the US, we're at the American US Embassy. Actually, just one's good, the American Embassy. So we're at the embassy.
In London,
I'm
right?
processing my paperwork. And we're all planning to go to the States. So Patrick, my stepson, who is my son as well, awesome guy. My wife, Carol, DJ is several months old, and myself. So I'm getting processed, and the immigration officer says, I was the last person that they saw that day. I'd been waiting probably 8 hours with my son. At the time, I had this awesome Planet Hollywood jacket that was really cool. so he's on my front. My wife and son are getting packed up at home. They're all excited that they're going back to Dallas the next day. Immigration officer comes and said, "You're not getting in. There's a problem. And do you want me to tell you what the issues and the ramifications are of that?" And I said, "Absolutely not. Thank you very much." And I left. Didn't need any more negativity, went straight back to my lawyer, and it was a paperwork admin glitch. The next morning, by the way, my wife and son, elder son, Patrick, they're now in America. They left me. Can you believe it, Eric? They just left me here with my little guy. They were fleeing, like a bat out of hell. And I wasn't happy about it, but they're off. They're having great time in Dallas, or they're en route to Dallas. I then get processed, walk up the next morning with my son. Again, he's on my chest, and they take my paperwork. They go into the back, come back, stamped, processed. That was it. So that was the beginning.
What happened, right?
Right. So it was a welcome to America, almost. So that was my coming to America moment.
Right. So you're now in the US. She's got a fabulous job, a lot of responsibilities. How do you find a job? How do you organize yourself? What are the next steps?
I don't want to make my wife the hero of this, but it's coming out really bad.
But she is. I'm sorry, she is.
So my wife is working at Pizza Hut, doing great. They have this game called Bunko. And all the ladies come and do wine and cheese and all that kind of stuff. And during this game, she meets this headhunter called Ginger, a great lady, who said, "What does your husband do?" So she explains, what I've been doing in Europe with, the restaurants and my background. And she said, "I know somebody who's got this advanced cooking technology that your husband should meet." So again, my wife is brokering the meeting that gets me employed. And ultimately, what that leads to is me becoming the vice president of Turbo Chef. You may not know Turbo Chef, but you've definitely seen a Turbo Chef oven, Eric. If you've gone into any Starbucks, any Subway, any Safeway, most of the takeout and restaurant businesses have a small rapid cook oven, a little bit bigger than a commercial oven. Can cook a pizza in a couple of minutes, steak in a couple of minutes, can even do souffles. This thing is so versatile. I ended up managing the commercialization of that business that then was acquired. The rights of the commercial business was acquired by Maytag. So that's how I got to Turbo Chef. We signed up Subway. We signed up some other big accounts. We got a lot of rejections along the way, but that's like any new technology. You've got to be like Winston Churchill. You move from one failure to another without a loss of optimism. That's the reality. You got to keep, you get knocked down 7 times, you get up 8 times. So that leads me to Maytag. And then Maytag say, "We want you to be in charge of all advanced technologies for their global business." So it's the vending machines that, by the way, when you go and get a Coke and a Pepsi or whatever in one of those vending machines, about 90% of the market share at that time was a company called Dixie Narco, which was part of Maytag Commercial Group. Then you went to the zoos and you got the camera. Back in the day, in the 90s, you got the Kodak and Polaroid cameras. Those were from vending machines that I also managed. So I'm managing now advanced technology and Turbo Chef still for the company, and did that for a couple of years. Got great learnings, a lot of rejection, but it toughens you up. It hardens you to just have the resilience, which I think I've demonstrated all my life, but even now more so in business. You are really launching a new frontier of technology and capabilities in the restaurant space at the time.
And on that note, also one other thing I thought fascinating in your book is how you explain how you're being successful. You're listening to the people, to the team, you're listening to the customers, you're looking at strategy, and always, focusing on what's best for the people and what's best for the customer, which I love. But you also confronted to the reality of dealing with private equity.
Right.
And also with people. As I always say, there's one thing that is very important for me. Then, I'm looking to acquire a business today. And on my website, it's clearly written, we have a no asshole policy. But unfortunately, in those events, you only need one, right?
And usually there's always one. There's always one a-hole, as you said, out there who causes complete. It's like they work for idiots or us, and they're like a human tapeworm. You've got to get away from them. They're a negative, draining, cantankerous, festering wound on you, and you've just got to lose them from that. And unfortunately, they exist.
And there's several times in your book, I'm thinking, wow, great strategy. Wow, all the people, wow, they're winning. And then there's one person that owns maybe the wallet, and it's a disaster. So, but you again, you evolve, you look different opportunities. You've had, I think, 56 different lives. And it's just fascinating. And then we're getting to Centerplate and what you're doing with venues, which is obviously something that very familiar to a lot of the people listening. So what is the situation when you arrive there, and how do you turn around where you're like David against Goliath at that moment?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, I got so many experiences and so many learnings from my other roles that I've had the pleasure. So got a lot of experiences working in button down retail in Whitbread. Come to America, it's like the Wild West commercializing, Turbo Chef, rejection after rejection. Then I get my first taste of working with private equity and great company, Kohlberg, sharp elbows like any, private equity group. They want returns. We want to build the community as well, but they're more return focused, which is okay. And you have to understand that. You have to know you're not going to retire when you go into these organizations, because the mandate is 3 to 5 year holds. Somebody else is going to come in. You got to understand that's got to be your psyche. And if you can't handle that, then you're not for the private equity life. So I got a lot of learnings and respect for PE, and particularly Kohlberg, who, by the way, I did get their number 1 and number 2 returns at the time of the transaction. So good success there. And then that led me to Safeway, that led me to IHOP. So that's what got me to then Centerplate, as the question. So I'm running a multi-billion-dollar, the world's largest family dining restaurant chain. We're having success. We've got great strategy in place. We've turned around quickly within a 6-7 month period, a declining sales number to a very positive and rosy sales number. We changed the marketing strategy. We brought in different talent, and it's all about how you motivate and how you empower. So we're having success. And then I got a call from Kohlberg again, the private equity group, saying, we're really interested in acquiring Centerplate. It was at the time running about 150 big venues around North America. So think about the New Orleans Saints, the San Diego Chargers at the time, the Miami Dolphins, Tennessee Titans, big clubs. We're doing all the food, most of the merchandise. So as I'm looking at that opportunity, the thought was I would become the chairman and still continue at IHOP. The more I got into understanding Centerplate, understanding the issues that it had, it was like moving seats around the Titanic.
Before we go just further, how did you understand? What did you do to understand the challenges? I think it's important for listeners as well.
Yeah, well, you can't navel gaze and you can't manage from the ivory tower. From my perspective, my number 1 challenge was I need to find out reality. It's like the song, The First Cut is the Deepest. You got to make that cut. You got to go in and know what is actually happening. You can speak to your CFO and your EVP and your business development guy until you're blue in the face. They'll have a perspective. What you got to get, though, is reality. What's the reality check? And so how I did that, and have done with most of the business, but specifically to your question on Centerplate, was the plan was I was going to visit 100 venues in the first 100 days. So I was going to get to see 66% of all the venues, spend time with the client, spend time with, that's the club owner, that's the NFL owner, the MLB owner, the NBA owner. These are power players. Understand the business from their perspective, but meet my operations team as well, meet my local partners. And within 100 days, I didn't do 100 visits, I did 150. So I got to see almost every single venue within a 4-month period. So we had a reality check, and then we brought in hundreds of our senior leadership team. So we had about 40,000 employees, 2,000 managers, but we brought hundreds of the senior team and others embedded in the organization. So we got a real good feel. And we started to develop what is our game plan. I call it the plan on a page. What's the vision, the objectives, the goals, and the imperatives? And we just started thinking about what do we stand for? And then also, what don't we stand for? Which is equally as illuminating and focusing on the mind. So it's like having that fanatical focus, then doing something that many leaders can't do. I didn't dictate the execution strategy. We said, this is our vision. We're going to create great every day. We're going to create extraordinary experiences. Let's you, working with your team, let's define that, what it means in each of these venues. I wanted to be the anti-cookie cutter. We were in the concessions business when I joined, Eric. We elevated to join the event hospitality business. We created that business. It's an image. Concession is very similar to concede in my book.
Yeah,
I wanted nothing to do with that. I wanted to be different, special, unique, irreverent, and invigorating.
There's
So
a
we set
moment.
out on a mission.
There's a moment in the book. Sorry for interrupting you, but I think it's fascinating when you say we elevated it. We call it event hospitality, and there you're mentioning that they're I don't know how to call them, conservative people, old consultant that pretendiously have seen everything in their life. They were just laughing at you and said, and then the next thing you know, everybody's calling themselves into event hospitality. So again, you change completely with your conviction and your strategy and your let's go. You completely changed the way the industry look at that business.
And you know this space well, so I take that as a high praise, and I really appreciate that. And
It
that's what
is.
we set out to be. Who wants to set up and get up and jump out of bed and say, you know what? What this world needs is another mediocrity company. They don't need that. They want special. They want unique. And that's the vision. That's what we set out to do. And by the way, Eric, when we first got there, our win rate on new bids was 8%. So that's 8, less than 10. The last year we're above 58+%. I had 7, 8 different competitors. We were eating the lion's share. And it just shows you when you got a good strategy, great people, commitment, you fund it right, you focus right, you align right, you can achieve great. And we certainly did in that business.
And so up till now, we've been talking about, all your career, your journey. And as I said, I strongly recommend your book also for the management lessons that you are describing. And it's exciting to read your
Thank
journey.
you.
And there you are, where, the pinnacle of your life, everything's going great, wonderful family, extremely successful family I mean, both you and your wife. And then something happened that is going to destroy everything. And if you can share that story, and also we're gonna obviously talk about cancel culture and
Right.
with my friend Evan Neerman, who wrote the book The Cancel Culture Curse, which is also something I recommend to read, called the cancel vulture. Basically, people would probably have a very mediocre life and have nothing else to do than spending their life in front of a computer trying to destroy anybody and everybody's other life. So you are leading Centerplate, everything's going well, and then what?
So having a great time. We just got back from China with the family. Everything's going well. And it's like, if there's one year in my life that if I could sing shares, if I could turn back time, it would be 2014. Or just to show you how musically savvy I am, Eric, I'd shake it off like, Taylor Swift. So 2013 comes around. My wife is being designated with diagnosed and is going through treatment of breast cancer. I had a bilateral mastectomy. Things were difficult. It started to have it just grinds. You're thinking about, is your wife going to die? My mother died when I'm 9. She's 29. I'm projecting, okay? I'm not saying any of this is rational, and that's doesn't matter how smart you are, how savvy you think you are. Adversity is coming. I always say adversity is inevitable. Defeat is optional. But sometimes you don't see how bad things are and how screwed up you're managing things in the middle of the fog of an issue. So my wife's going through, breast cancer. She's struggling health-wise. It's not a green light. Okay, so it's difficult. I'm thinking, am I going to be raising my boys without my wife? And then suddenly my teenage son, doing great in school, gets a concussion. keeps it to himself. But his grades are really dipping. And we're asking what's going off. He's a gregarious guy. He's got my wife's personality. He's a real good guy. And then suddenly, and we don't know what's going on. And then suddenly he's playing basketball then. And we see that he jumps up. He's 6'5", my boy. I'm only 6'1". So, that's another story. But, he jumps up for the ball. The guy elbows him in the face. He comes back, knocks his head on the floor. We rush him immediately. He's unconscious. We rush him to the hospital. We give him an MRI. We find out now he's got a concussion, but it's worse than that. He had a concussion playing football that he didn't talk about. So he had a secondary knock-on concussion, which is very severe and egregious, if you like. My son is depressed. He's suddenly gone from a gregarious teenager to somebody who we don't even know if he can finish school. And it just breaks your heart to see that. So in the middle of that, I'm seeing my wife, I'm seeing my son, I've got the demands of my business. I was really spread too thin on too many boards. That's another thing we have to be careful about is, take what you can, don't overfill your cup. And in that process, I go to Vancouver because I then find out that I've got prostate cancer. So my wife's got breast cancer. My son's depressed. I've got and we went for many tests. I went for many tests. And I didn't want to tell my family that I was ill. I've always been the rock, Eric. I've always been the guy who gets stuff done. I don't need help. I've endured. I will continue to endure. And I've always played that role of when you're in trouble, you come to me. I'm fixing things. I'm the fixer. I couldn't fix it. So I said, I'm not telling my family. I don't want to worry my wife. I don't want to worry my son. I don't want to worry my family. I don't want to worry my friends. And so I find that there's a treatment that you can get, Eastern treatment in Vancouver that can help. So I go off to Vancouver. It's not like I was, traveling the world anyway. So I'd go, every other week for a session.
Suspicious. It's not suspicious. Pardon? It's not suspicious that you
right. So I go there, and as I'm at a bar, a restaurant, I see somebody, and we ended up having a conversation. And I did the worst thing in the world that you can do to somebody who loves you, and that is I was unfaithful. I was trying to hide myself from my own pain. You can't medicate not drugs. Actually, I was on antidepressants at the time, but alcohol. And I was trying to lead a release. That petered out very quickly. That wasn't part of the book, really, other than it was the worst thing I could have ever done to the person who loved me the most in my life ever, my wife, Carol. So clearly I'm disgusted with myself, and I wasn't operating like my normal self either at the time. If I was being candid, I should have taken a sabbatical. I should have said, Des, you can't handle everything. You always need help. I should have asked for help. I was too proud. My ego was too big. I was cashing checks that I had no right trying to write. And so this situation, I'm in Vancouver, which led to my canceling now, Eric. And I'm at the apartment complex. I'm having a cigar. I walk a 8-9-month-old Doberman Pinscher, pretty large dog, not a small little, Yorkshire Terrier. And as I'm walking, the dog must have seen something. It bolted behind me on my right side, yanked the lead, and it dislocated 2 of my fingers on my right hand. And, I took a picture of this and sent it to my doctor as well. Clearly, I was in a lot of pain. In that moment of pain, I lashed out and disciplined the dog. And unfortunately for me, about 5 seconds later, I'm walking into the elevator, having to bring the dog with me. The dog doesn't want to come, so I'm kind of pulling the dog. And I lose, I look down at the dog, look at my fingers, and I want to discipline the dog. I want to show that he's got to have some training. So it's got a dog harness on, so I could pick this dog up and swing it, and you couldn't hurt the dog. but I wanted to pick it up because I wanted to show it I was in control. I'm the alpha, if you like. I'm not saying this is great. I'm not proud of this in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just trying to tell you what was in my mind, on my mind at the time. So I'm trying to show the dog that I've got dominance. I give the dog a few kicks, but not football kicks, not soccer kicks, just trying to show again discipline. Wish I had handled it better, of course. I go back and tell the owner, this dog absolutely needs training. This dog is sent for training. There's no, I said, look, I've lost my temper. I've over-disciplined your dog. But it was all done and dusted, or so I thought. 6 weeks later, this video clip from the elevator is posted on Twitter. It's sent to...
How?
Great question. The security guard in the complex saw the video clip, didn't send it to the media because he felt, oh, this is awful. Didn't send it to the BC SPSC because it's awful.
What is SPSC? Sorry.
The Society of Protection of Cruelty to Animals,
okay.
British Columbia. So it was sent to them so he could get his boss fired so he could get a promotion. Look at this happened on this guy's watch. This is wrong. I can fix it. Put me in charge. That never happened, but that was the intent. Now, the SPCA leadership, when they saw the video, they didn't look at this and say, this is abhorrent. They looked at this and said, this guy who did this, young, CEO, wealthy, I want him to be my poster child. And they, unbelievably, Eric, I mean, again, I lay this out in the book. I'm not trying to be malicious in any way, shape, or form, just fact-based. I was the only incident in the last decade plus where I'm named, where they're putting my name up front. No other person. People have hurt hundreds and hundreds of cats and dogs and cattle and animals and never been named. I was singled out for special treatment. They wanted to use my face as a raising mechanism for funds.
Yeah, well, it is
simple as that.
Well, it's very fascinating when I was reading that part in your book, and you give plenty of details. It's like all the other cases, which were actually much more cruel to animals, never had the same treatment. They never mentioned the name of the people. They did not even pursue the same way they harass you. So from that moment on, and you get also, I think, the police coming in. And can you tell us about that incident and what happened the following days and the following weeks?
Well, it was a calamity of tragedy. It's like a Greek tragedy. Within 10 days, this next segment all happened. So for the viewer here, the reader, the listener, 10 days. My apartment gets raided by the police.
Raided?
I'm late. I've just come back from a treatment. I'm laid on the bed. I'm trying to recover. There's a pounding on the door. I'm thinking, who could this possibly be? I go to the peephole. I see police lined up, like a takedown of Pablo Escobar, or, you think of any, criminal, terrorist, whatever you want to think, lined up on both sides, waiting. And I had no idea. Have they got guns? Have they got batons? Have they got, tasers? This is an awful situation. I call my lawyer. He says, Des, put the phone on speaker. He instructs me to talk to the police. Have you got a warrant? Yep, slide it under the door. My lawyer says, read it. I read it out loud. He said, Des, put your hands to your side, open the door, let them in. They rush in. They ask me to move back into the kitchen area, and they start their interrogation. I'm not being roughhoused. They got no guns showing. It's not that type of situation. I'm not being pinned to the ground and handcuffed. But they basically said there's a video that shows you being very awful to a dog. And I'm thinking, my mind's running amok now. What have I, what's happened? Am I suspected drug guy? Am I a terror? Everything's going through my mind. When they said I'd mistreated a dog or I'd hurt a dog and it was on video, I kind of was elated. I thought, oh, at least, this doesn't end up in a bad situation. I had no idea this was going to end up more brutal than anything I'd experienced in my life. Within 2 days, it's on Twitter. There's 100,000 people screaming for my head. They're asking me to be fired. They're threatening my family. My son was attacked by one of these deranged people who'd stalked. There was many people outside my hotel at my complex back in Stamford, Connecticut now. So this happened in Vancouver. They followed me now to Stamford, Connecticut.
So hold on. That happened in Vancouver. You're back in Connecticut, and your son is being attacked in Connecticut by someone who saw the video
one
on
of the
Twitter.
deranged people who'd watched the Twitter feed. My wife was set death threats, like a ransom note on a newspaper where you clip out the letters and said, "We know where you live. You are not safe." It was a surreal moment. So I'm going through all this. My son's attacked. My wife's getting attacked. I'm getting attacked. My son is then going to Paris to go to college. It's like, again, calamity of events. He's going to Paris that Friday when it broke on Monday. So 5 days later, I go to Paris with him and Carol to manage this and manage his introduction into college life. And that was, I know I was going through hell, but I needed to show that my son, that I don't care how much trouble I am in, he is my priority. And I went to Paris with him. And that weekend, I talked to the board. We had now 3 PR agencies, Eric, managing this crisis through different dayports, so around the clock, so we could have total coverage. To be honest, it's like playing whack-a-mole. You can't manage it. Haters come out. It's unbelievable, the vitriol and abuse that is legal on Twitter. And it's just a disgrace, in my humble opinion. It's not what it was. It's set up with such potential, and it's now become like the scribbling nasty comments on the toilet wall that you used to do before you had social media. But now that's in the stratosphere. So what I found out after I resigned was there was 6 really super trolls on Twitter who kept retweeting this story.
Can I interrupt you before we speak about those 6 super trolls? So you're in Paris, you're talking with the board. And if I remember well, at the beginning, the board is, okay, we're going to find a solution. We're fighting it. You have their back. So then you just say now, after you resign. So what happened in between?
Yeah, well, it's really tragic. And it's, one of the things I've always done is I believe in people. People are going to make mistakes. And if they're good people, I'm going to stand behind them. And I've done it time and time again. I've got many stories in my book where, board members and companies have wanted me to fire people. And I will fire people as CEO or president when I'm good and ready and it's validated, not because it's convenient for them or even for me. And so I had a conversation with the board on the Sunday. So now it's a full week later, almost, and get off the call where they're going to support me. Because the board has to support the CEO. Definitely. Without that, it doesn't matter how much chutzpah or courage that I possess. If they don't back you, you're kind of dead man walking, woman walking, whatever we want to say. And so I got off the call. They said, "Yep, we're going to continue to support you." I got on with my management team. Said, "This is the game plan. We're going to survive the weekend, which was a weekend break, a holiday back in the US. If we can get past that, then the news cycle will move. Yes, I'll take my lumps, but and I'll be bruised and I've lost a lot of my, personal brand, but it's not irredeemable. I'll make up. We'll come back and fight." Then about an hour later, after I've made all these calls, the chairman and the equity partner, my contact there, called me back and said, you got 24 hours to resign. You can resign or we'll fire you. And, it's just sucked every ounce of feeling. I was then like somebody just pulled the fuse on my head. And it was just such a disappointing, traumatic moment of what I call real betrayal than anything I've ever thought. And I just couldn't believe it would happen. We've raised money for charities. We're doing great. The business is fantastic. I made a mistake, a bad mistake, but I didn't go out purposely try to hurt anybody. I didn't go out and hurt and cause physical damage to a person. I didn't go out and, maliciously, steal funds. This was a isolated incident that clearly has never happened in my entire career.
And that's another thing that is, I thought, fascinating reading your book. So you've grown so many people, so many companies, you've made them so many millions, and also you've raised, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the course of your life, you've raised close to $100 million for different charities and helping kids in distress and other cause. And here we are. You made a mistake, and you clearly acknowledge it and apologize for it, but clearly not hiding anything. And we can always debate the mistake, but as you say, you didn't kill somebody or steal millions.
Right.
And there, because of the social media and this cancel culture, I mean, your life completely changed. And I would add as well, with the lack of courage of people that might have money, but probably not enough big balls, excuse my French. What are those 6 people that you're mentioning? And how could they have had so much power in a world like that when they don't know you, they don't know what you're doing, and nobody knows them?
Well, that's really the Twitterverse as it is today. It really is, they say it's blue checkers, the blue checkers on Twitter, but they really should be designated, as I say in the book, skull and crossbow. These people are real bad pirates, digital assassins. They're about as sharp as a frisbee, but they are deathly with their keyboard. The keyboard is complete power. The thing about social media and why you can get authority on that platform is it's because it's purely anonymity. Nobody knows who you are. You can say and scream whatever you want, but it's not like we're talking on the phone or we're in person, Eric. They wouldn't say the same things to me or you in public because they haven't got the courage to do that. There is real bad actors out there. So these trolls, if you like, they're not leaders, Eric. They just have the ability to constantly send out tweets, retweet. So 5 or 6 of these people were just constantly retweeting this story. So what we found out, there's 180,000 people who've been on this Twitter. 6 of them did 120,000 repostings of that.
Really?
So there's a handful of people completely causing anarchy. And by the way, this has been going on for the last 9 years. This did not stop then. There's vitriol, attacks, death threats. I got the police involved, but until there's a timing and a place, there's not really much they can do. They're unhinged. And what happened is these 5 or 6 people were retweeting. And then, as misery likes company, the founder of Red Mango at the time, Dan Kim, he saw this video. Again, it's in the book. Saw the video. It triggered him. He got a memory of a childhood experience that I'm not going to go into. It's not my place or space. And he unleashed or helped this whole change.org petition to have me fired. So this one individual really set on blaze the biggest, Joan of Arc fire humanly possible. Again, tragic. And I've met Dan since then. He's actually
Yeah.
been a board member of mine.
Yeah, exactly. Is one of your board member in one of the companies.
An advisor, I should say, not board member. But the reality is, my friend said, am I crazy? Why would you do that? We just can't walk around with that level of hatred in your body. If you do, you might as well dig a grave for two, you and them. You got to move past it. I had to, if I can't forgive, first of all, it took me years to forgive myself. I'd been unfaithful to my wife. I shouldn't have done that. I put myself in this situation. I lost my temper when I should have handled it better. All those things were all factors that were in my control. But what wasn't in my control was managing social media. And it took a unbelievable, it's like, we all see what, fires can do. We've just seen one tragically, and my heart goes out to everybody in Maui for sure. Got friends there as well. So God bless them all. And hopefully we'll find many, many more still alive. But the reality is that set off a fire that I never thought I would have to be involved with at any part of my life.
You know what is frightening to me is like I'm listening to you so you have 6 people mainly that and to share that 125,000 times. Basically, there's 6 people that have nothing else to do in their freaking life than reposting and reposting and reposting. And then you have one person with major follower, which is igniting everything. And at that moment, everything you've done in your life, it's forgotten. And you have board members that are cowards and are just more concerned about the short term. Probably they've supported you 3 weeks later or 2 months later. That people will not be talking about that anymore. But they just amplify the thing, and it's frightening to me because as also Evan Neerman mentioned in this book, The Cancel Culture Curse. This is how we get in touch and you reach out to me. He's mentioning other cases of people that are not as powerful as you, that are not as big companies as you, and they got the same treatment. It's frightening. What could be done? Because in Evan's word, this is the cancel culture is really attacking our freedom and the basis of our society.
Yeah, I wish he wasn't right, but he's so right. It's not funny. And I'm in the process of working on my second book, which is Think Your Way to the Top. And I cover the whole cancel culture as one of my 4 exercises. It's 52 thoughts that takes a reader on a executive like kind of boot camp for them to really think about how can they supercharge their career. And the reality is they're here to stay if we give them the audience and we give them the power. And it's that simple. Ultimately, it's like, I love the story that Jennifer Anderson came out with on over the wire yesterday. I think she's doing the cover for the Wall Street Journal magazine, where she said enough of cancel culture. Not everybody is Jeffrey Epstein. Don't tar them all with the same crime. There's got to be a graduation of punishment. And that's not there today with social media.
Now, on a personal note, I would say that the way I look at it, that they've pursued and they inquire more about what you did than what Jeffrey Epstein did, which it's absolutely insane. But that's a personal thought on that. So when you are today, that happened a few years ago, and you say they're still posting and then trying to troll that. How did you survive that? How does your wife, your family overcome that? And where are you today?
Well, first of all, if it wasn't for my wife and supporting me and keeping by my side, even though I'd let her down, then I don't think I would have made the comeback that I've made. And that's her graciousness and her belief and support. So without that, I don't think it would have happened. My family were 99.9% supportive. Ultimately, they all know me. They know what I stand for. I made a mistake. They look at it. They say, hey, look at the book of this person. This is one incident. Move on. My friends were predominantly the same. But unfortunately, in corporate America, they're not the same. They are very risk averse. They get threatened and scared of being canceled on a daily basis. And so their Rubicon's very much different than how I think and how you may think. They're thinking about, I got to protect my company. I don't want any bad press. This guy's had bad press. I don't want to deal with that. Therefore, they just want to cut that off. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter how good you've been and how successful you've been and how caring you've been. You just get ostracized. It's like you get put into the desert. Go away. We don't, and the sad thing, Eric, is to a person, I've had two executives said, Des, you really, really disappointed me. And I didn't know you were that kind of person. We talked it through. And I don't think it made a difference because when people have got their own opinion, sometimes they're just so blinkered they can't change to listen to the story. But to a person, the private equity groups, the corporate guys, the corporate ladies, they said, Des, we've done so much more worse than you. My bad moment wasn't caught on camera. But that hasn't helped me for the last 9 years. So I've been kind of working and trying to make a living and doing, in smaller roles that doesn't get the attention, doesn't get the media. And I'm hoping this story changes that, Eric. I hope it's time for saying, when somebody makes a mistake, isn't there such thing as redemption? They didn't intentionally go out and try and say, hey, it's 11 o'clock, let's go and screw up. They made a genuine mistake, and there's got to be a way for it. Isn't that Judeo-Christian? How do we all start on redemption and faith? And doesn't matter what religion, it's called always about forgiveness, isn't it?
Yeah.
This seemingly hasn't been possible in society for the last 9+ years. Yeah. And as you said, and as Eric wrote about in his book, and I do in my book, I list out 6 or 7 different cases where people have been cancelled for unbelievable things. And we've got to be tough enough and have enough courage and conviction and say, no more. It's up to us. We can either be led or we can lead.
Yep.
And I think it's going to take some moral toughness and conviction to change that narrative moving forward. But I think society is more likely to listen and more ready to listen now than maybe a few years ago.
I believe that as well, although I think there's still a long way to go. And that's why I applaud you for writing this book. And that has been the longest podcast I ever recorded with the 180 episode. And I'm glad you took the time to share that with me, because I think it's important to explain how great of a leader you are and what happened with one mistake that social media used in the wrong way. How are you doing today? How are you looking at life? How's your family?
Well, my sons are doing great. One's working with Jeff Bezos on his rocket system down in Cape Canaveral. My other son's living in New Orleans, doing great. He's actually right now narrating my book.
Oh, wonderful.
And I didn't put him under any pressure, Eric. I just said, if this doesn't go well, it's because you didn't speak to it correctly. So he's having a great time. My wife's, full recovery. I'm in full recovery mode. Healthy-wise, we've never been better. I'm writing, as I said, or I'm launching this first book on September 12th.
Yep.
The second book is, my wife is just finishing final edits so we can get it to the publisher. That will be coming out next year. Think Your Way to the Top. We're working on Not Taking Your Job at All. We love your podcast, The Business of Meetings. But I'm going to start my own podcast called Onwards, with talking about leadership lessons in business, sharing what I've learned so others can learn, fitness and health tips and other things as well, going through illness. So that's going to be launching as well. And just trying to have a lot of, spend as much time with my 3 grandkids as my kids will let me, and just have fun. So that's kind of my game plan over the next few years. And hopefully, a company will have the courage to say, this guy, it needs to have a chance, and we want him to run our business and drive it to new heights. So I've not closed the door on that happening, but we shall see.
Wonderful. That's my last question. When we meet face to face in 1 year with a bottle of champagne,
Yes.
What are we going to celebrate? And by the way, sorry, let me rephrase, because in both our case, when we meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne and a cigar, what are we going to celebrate?
Well, I'm hoping we're going to celebrate life. First and foremost, I had a serious accident about 8-9 weeks ago and was hospitalized. I broke 3 ribs and punctured my lung. In hospital for a week. It took me several weeks to just be able to walk again without pain and be able to sleep without pain. And so I always celebrate health and wellness. Obviously, my wife had a scare, I've had a scare. So we're healthy, we're prosperous. Hopefully we're going to say, I got a bestseller. I've got my 2nd book launched. I've got my podcast working. And I really would love to have another company to run, but we shall see. And if not, I'll be celebrating you with that champagne and cigar, celebrating your successes of, your wife, Elisa, and then your 3 kids. Yeah. I think Naomi, Shell, and Tillian. Yeah. So we're just having, we're celebrating good friends.
Wonderful. Des Hague, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Awesome. Thank you for your time. And again, last plug, buy this guy's book. You can see it behind him. Before it's too late. What a read. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Des. Des, thank you so much for sharing your story and writing this fascinating book, 15 Minutes of Shame. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this conversation and will share it with your network, because people need to know about cancel culture and what it can do. If you want to connect with me, please reach out on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. Thank you. Bye-bye.